open radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the second hour of our 3-hour show. A reminder, we're going to a 3-hour format here today. And at the moment, we're still having a little difficulty connecting with Sibel Edmonds, so we're going to, we have lots of time. We'll get her here eventually. And we're going to basically keep talking about the news and your phone calls until we connect with her. Interesting little story came in. Apparently, there has been a rash of burglaries inside the Capitol building at Washington, D.C., and they're taking things, cash, computer equipment, things like autographed baseballs, and alcohol. And the security at the Congress is saying, considering that some of these thefts are occurring in offices whose doors are locked, it might be an inside job. Gee, you think? I got a suspect list with about 535 suspects right on it, who are not known for being honorable and moral and law-abiding people. So the U.S. government is not content with merely looting the American people. They're looting the office supplies. They must know it's all going to come apart. They're starting to take all the goodies and get the heck out. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we're starting to see more and more talk trying to fan up the race issue for the coming election. As you remember yesterday, they tried to come up and say, oh, well, the examination of Trayvon Martin showed that he was, in fact, in a fight with George Zimmerman. Therefore, he must have attacked Zimmerman, and Zimmerman was right to shoot him. Well, actually, no. All the evidence shows is there was a fight between the two individuals, and it does not show who started it. Remember, Zimmerman was told by the police, we don't need you to follow this guy. And it doesn't really matter. I don't really care about Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin. This is being fanned up to try and build this illusion that there is a race crisis in the United States of America. And earlier today we had this story. It was on CNN about how less than half of the babies being born in the United States of America are white. Ooh, horror of horrors. The only reason they're waving that around is to sell you this illusion that there's a race problem, which Obama is going to leap in to save here. It's like Obama is standing out there in the middle of the Beltway in Washington, D.C., waving his arms around. And somebody comes up and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm keeping the wild elephants away. And the other guy says, are you kidding? There isn't a wild elephant within 5,000 miles. And Obama says, that's absolutely right. It works. Vote for me again in November. All right, we've got Sibel Edmonds on the line here, and I know we're only going to be able to say hello before we do the commercial break. But Sibel, aloha. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me on, Michael. It's a privilege.
Well, the privilege and honor is mine. We seem to have a loop back on the phone connection that Dan will be fixing here. Obviously... Okay, Dan, can we fix that? Okay, thank you very much. All right. Obviously, everybody is all excited about finally the release of your book, Classified Woman, and we've got the link to your webpage up at whatreallyhappened.com. And just reading through this book, I've had some dealings with the FBI myself over the years, and there are so many different aspects to this, in part relating to the culture of the FBI that it shows inside there, and it's certainly not the image of the FBI we get from TV shows and movies like the FBI Story, and we know that the FBI always goes into Hollywood to make sure that this certain right image of the FBI is being shown, and even up to involvement in Silence of the Lambs. And we know the real FBI isn't like that. We've had COINTELPRO, we've had the demotion of Frederick Whitehurst, who was in charge of the FBI lab, all kinds of things like that. So we're going to take a break here for commercials, and when we come back, we're going to hope we have this phone lash up working, and then I want to hear exactly your story about everything that happened and just how hard it was, the abuse they heaped upon you. So, Sibel, thank you for patience with our technical issues. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we have our technical gremlins under control now. And even if we don't, I think the best way to avoid the echo is for me to shut the heck up and let Sibel tell her story. So, Sibel, for the benefit of those one or two people out there who've been in a monastery and don't know your story, what exactly give us a rundown on the events, starting with your hiring by the FBI and 9/11 and all the abuse they've heaped on you, leading to the publication of your book, Classified Woman.
Sure. I started working for the FBI 3 days after 9/11. And what happened was a few years before that, in 1997, when I was going to university there, I had applied for an internship position in child criminal division. This division deals with crime against children. But they noticed my linguistic skills because I speak Farsi, and it's the language for in Iran. It's spoken in Iran, Turkish, and some other Turkic dialects such as Azerbaijani. And they said, well, they didn't have that internship position available, but they were interested in my language abilities. They asked me to take proficiency exams, and I was not really interested in working as a translator. Anyhow, I didn't go to work for them at that point. 3 days after 9/11, I got a call from the FBI, and they said, they had a top secret clearance in place for me. They badly needed my linguistic skills, and they basically said this was my chance to contribute and do something for my country because these languages were really badly needed to fight against the terrorism. So I couldn't have said no. I mean, they're telling me, this is the FBI, that I could contribute, I could do something for my country. So I said, okay. So I started working for the FBI, translating communications, documents, interrogations in these languages for Farsi, Turkish, and Azerbaijani. And I had top secret clearance. And I worked for counterterrorism-related investigation cases with certain agents that dealt directly with terrorism investigations. I also, and this is mainly, worked under counterintelligence division, and this division dealt with espionage, foreign lobby, criminal activities by foreigners or joint foreigners, U.S. people, groups and entities, and a little bit of criminal investigation. So I worked with various field offices all over the country. I worked with several agents and 2-3 different divisions. And within the first few weeks when I started working for the FBI, I noticed how bad things were. And the initial stuff, and I'm saying bad, I'm talking about incompetence, nepotism, very inefficient, wasteful, a lot of people committing fraud and abusing tax dollars. Those are the ones I'm talking about. And later, I came across major criminal operations that were being covered up by the FBI due to pressure from CIA and the State Department. To say it differently, FBI, they were investigating for years, since 1995, 1996, some notorious criminal network and operations that involved foreigners, Turkish, Israeli, etc., that also had penetrated and was working with U.S. people. And the U.S. people, some of these people were high-level people in Congress, in the State Department, in Pentagon. So it was criminal, counter-espionage, and counterintelligence combined. But because the high-level personalities involved and people involved, and because it involved some criminal activities by NATO, there's a secret arm of NATO that was involved in this international operation, both also in the United States. The State Department and the CIA were dragging and making FBI to not send this stuff into real criminal divisions and prosecute people. Basically, they were shutting down our cases. So that was one, and an espionage case. So initially, I reported these issues to my supervisors, and then from there, I went one level higher, and I went to the headquarters and took it to the FBI's director at that time. He's still a director. He's been now for 13 years. That's very unusual, Mike. Mueller. And they started retaliating against me. And they came to my house. They confiscated my computer. They wanted to know if I was communicating about these issues with Congress. And they didn't find anything in my computer, but they took my husband's computer. They took my computer. They administered polygraph. They took several hours. And then eventually they fired me. And then I said, okay, well, I will take these issues to the other branch of our government, and that is Congress. The appropriate committees, the Senate Judiciary Committee, House Judiciary Committee, intelligence committees. And they started initially investigating my case. In fact, they came out publicly, and this was bipartisan. Senator Grassley, Republican, and Senator Leahy, Democrat, they issued a statement to the media, and they said they had investigated the case. They even talked with people from the FBI. Then they found that all the stuff that I've been reporting, they were accurate, they were credible, and there was a case of espionage and cover-up within the FBI. Well, a few months after that, the Attorney General, at the time it was John Ashcroft, and this is October 2002, he came out, the Justice Department, and invoked this arcane executive privilege called state secrets privilege in my case. In fact, now people have heard about state secrets privilege invocation. I was the first case with George W. Bush administration. I was the first victim recipient of state secrets privilege. It basically acts as a gag order. It's unconstitutional. That law is based on, that privilege is based on common law. Congress has never approved it, but the president can use it. So the State Department and White House had Attorney General invoke this incredible nuclear gag order in my case, saying my case, even if correct, could not be argued in court under any circumstances because it would jeopardize U.S. diplomatic relations, U.S. intelligence gathering methods, and high-level activities by our intelligence services, not only the FBI. In fact, it has nothing to do with the FBI at this point. It had everything to do with the CIA and the State Department. Later, and later being a few months later, the same Attorney General, DOJ, invoked another gag order on Congress, saying these senators, Senator Grassley and Leahy, had to take off everything that's related to my case from their website, including their statements to the media and CBS 60 Minutes. You would say, and this is unconstitutional, you can't have the executive branch go and issue a gag order on legislative branch, right? But the Congress didn't challenge. They didn't challenge Attorney General, and they actually complied. I mean, tens of thousands of people had already downloaded, had already seen these statements that they had made and documents on their websites, yet they went there and they pulled them off their websites, Mike. And then after that, they didn't want to have anything to do with me.
And boy, they're acting like they got some, like they're acting like they've got a really big, deep, dark secret to hide.
Well, because everyone does in Congress, and that's one of the things that FBI does. And you learn that all the people in the FBI know. People, outsiders, they think that, you know, that J. Edgar Hoover's days were that way and those days been over for a long time. No. From these counterintelligence investigations, not only my division, they had a division for Israel, Hebrew, with several translators and analysts. This is the FBI. They had it Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, China. Well, if through my case I came across at least 12, 13 corrupt criminal congressmen and women, you know, the agent I was working with, he was a good guy. He said, imagine how many others there are that these other divisions, translation divisions and analysts are coming across daily, who are working with other types of foreign entities and foreign lobbies, whether it's APAC, etc. So one of the things that the agent I worked with warned me about, he said, drop this case. Don't report it to Congress. He asked me, he said, how are you going to determine who's clean to go to? I mean, that is explosive. I was so naive. I was so green before I took this job with the FBI. Mike, I have a master's degree in public policy. I have degrees in criminal justice and criminal psychology, and with this public policy, I totally believe that there was this thing called the separation of powers, a system of checks and balances, that Congress actually had the oversight. None of those are true. It exists only in theory, in those textbooks. When you really go and deal with Congress and the executive, especially the intelligence agencies, you see that there is no such a thing as oversight. J. Edgar Hoover's days were never over, still continues to date. They have blackmail power not only over Congress, but also over judges. And this is why in my book I'm listing, these are the people with names and places, all these cases, a classified woman. And one agent, before he was promoted to be higher level, this is another good guy there, another good FBI agent, his job was, when he first started with the FBI, was to conduct background investigation on federal court judges that had been nominated to the bench, right? They have to go and make sure they're okay. Well, he would sometimes come across some criminal elements or gray areas. And initially, when he would turn those findings to the FBI, he thought that they would say, okay, so we have to cross this guy. Let the president know that he's not qualified, right? No. In fact, those were the judges that were given priorities. And this is for federal bench here in D.C.
Because they're controllable.
Exactly.
Sibel, we're going to have to take a break for commercials right here. We're going to be away for about 3 minutes, and we'll come right back. And I want to pick up on this topic because you have hit something that is central to understanding the deterioration of our nation. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Sibel Edmonds, author of the new book, Classified Woman. It's available for sale on Amazon. We're going to get that information to you before the end of the interview. But I want to pick up with the comment that you made just before we went to the commercial break, where the FBI was vetting nominated judges for the administration. But instead of coming up with a list of judges who had never done anything wrong, they were providing judges who had something in their background through which they could be blackmailed and therefore controlled by the administration. Does that about sum it up?
On again for years and years, like this particular agent who reported this, and later on, in fact, I even took it to some civil liberties-related organizations. They were afraid of taking that case on and pursue it because this is what the ACLU said. We don't want to piss off any judges out there. So nobody wants to touch that kind of a case because it involves federal judges. This agent was doing this during Clinton administration. And, of course, this thing continued on to George W. Bush administration. And I'm sure, I haven't been within in the FBI, but I'm sure this is a practice. This is a common practice by the federal government, by the FBI. When they do, they want skeletons. If you have no skeletons, like let's say if you're like Ron Paul, it's just that then their system has a hole on it, and they can't have that. They can't afford it. Maybe one or two, but they can't afford it as a whole. For this broken system to remain this way, they need people with skeletons. Everybody has to be in it. Controllable.
Well, I've often wondered this amazing control that Israel seems to have over the United States Congress. We know a lot of it has to do with money coming out of AIPAC, but it seems like everybody who runs for office in the United States, first thing they do is they go over to Israel. Mitt Romney's going over there to Israel, and I don't know, maybe while they're over there, they get them drunk and they get pictures of them with, a sheep in a nightie in their bed or something, and from that point on, they can be blackmailed and controlled and they become Israel's loyal supporters here in the United States of America.
Right, and it has become such an accepted practice and norm. Nobody even engages in critical thinking. Nobody stops and questions it. One of my neighbors here worked back when Kerry was running for president, so he was one of his financial people, and this is long before the elections, before he backed out. It was, he said now Kerry's brother, this is Senator Kerry's, is in for 3 weeks for a tour in Israel to gather support for Kerry. And my first question always will be, I know the answer, of course, is like, okay, this is a U.S. president, it's for U.S. elections. Why in the world our presidents and our congressional people go to Israel to get their support for the elections here, American elections? I mean, imagine if he would have gone to Saudi Arabia or to China. I mean, we would be hanging a guy like that, right? But this is not even secret. They say, oh, yeah, Israel must not. They have to say yes. They have to approve. I mean, that's disgusting.
I agree.
It's outrageous, but people are
agree.
not getting outraged. That's puzzling.
Well, I think you'll find our audience is, in fact, very outraged by it because we have a saying that we have around our radio show and our website, no government can serve two masters. And a government that serves Israel is not serving the people of the United States of America. Now, this is a very short segment. We're about to come up on another commercial break, but I really want to get into the circumstances of the writing of your book, Classified Woman, and the extreme, how shall I put this delicately, resistance that you ran into trying to get this published and cleared for distribution and sale. So we've got about 2 minutes before the commercial break. Why don't you start telling us how the book came
Sure.
to be?
As you know, with my case, I was tied up with courts for 6 years, all the way up to the Supreme Court and Congress, pushing Congress to investigate the case, which never got anywhere. So I finally decided to write this book, And one of the things that FBI does when they give you top secret clearance, you work for them, you sign away all your rights. And that is, if you're going to write a book, you have to submit it to the FBI. They have 30 business days to review your book, classify and redact anything that they consider secret, intelligence related, but they can be capricious about it. Then they give you back the manuscript. You publish whatever it is without the redacted portions, right? Well, I submitted it to the FBI more than a year ago. They had 30 business days. They've been sitting on it for 380 days. And they've been sending threat letters to my attorneys saying, I am not allowed to publish a single word. Not that they have this or this sentence to be redacted. They are saying, we're not going to give this manuscript back to you, and you have no right to publish this book. Period. So I basically decided to challenge it, and I'm doing it basically armed with my own First Amendment rights. I'm standing up for my First Amendment rights, and I am publishing it. It's out there. And anybody who gets this and reads this, they are standing up for their own First Amendment rights, for their right to know. And now my attorneys, they are waiting to see what's going to come next from the FBI because their threat letter is saying they're going to prosecute me.
Well, let me just say right now, having read the book, because you were gracious enough to send me a copy of it right here, having read the book, there doesn't seem to be anything of a national security issue in it that the FBI could object to. But what it definitely does is it portrays the FBI as a bunch of goofballs, politicos, as you say, rank incompetence throughout the entire system, a nepotism, extraordinary waste. I've had enough contact with the FBI to know that this is an accurate portrayal. And so what they're worried about here is not the national security, but their own self-image. And, yeah, they're going to act like mafia thugs to try and shut you down. You have a lot of courage to put this book out. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Sibel Edmonds, author of Classified Woman, an autobiography or memoir, if you will, regarding her work at the FBI as a translator, the things she saw in the aftermath of 9/11, her efforts to basically be a whistleblower, and the wall that she ran into. And, again, having read the book, what I see there is a very accurate portrayal of the FBI as I have known them and interacted with the whole national security apparatus. I remember a while back during one of the major attacks on our servers, and the local FBI, their computer crime expert, was just totally ignorant. And just talking to him, I could tell he didn't know a tenth about computer security that I did, and I was supposed to be the victim in this situation. I've had one contact with the Central Intelligence Agency that I'm aware of, and that was back when I was at CBS Television City when there was an attempt to recruit me by these people that were operating out of the Pacific Institute for Advanced Research up on Franklin Avenue, I think is what they call themselves, and it was being run by a guy named Mason Rose. And I know we've all seen the Tom Clancy movies, and we all would like to imagine that CIA are all Harrison Ford or the image of the FBI that we see in Silence of the Lambs and so forth, but it just isn't so. Frankly, as far as I can tell, the only difference between the CIA and the mafia is the CIA likes to wave the flag around and they have more powerful weapons. But in the end, there seems to be this cultural attitude that the willingness to lie, cheat, steal, and kill makes them better human beings, and it doesn't. It just makes them human beings willing to lie, cheat, steal, and kill, and there really isn't a lot of control. And I kind of wanted to sort of get that off my chest here. And turning the microphone back over to Sibel, do you remember back right after the crash of TWA 800 off of Long Island, and they tried to say, oh, it was terrorists. No, it wasn't really terrorists. It was a fuel tank, and back and forth. And the most startling thing to come out of that, besides the obvious fact that the government was lying, was President Clinton immediately signed an executive order revoking all whistleblower protections for the people involved in the search for debris and wreckage off the coast of Long Island. And that sent up a red warning flag because up until this point, whistleblowers are considered a necessary aspect of society to basically hold society's more reckless and evil individuals in check. So here you were trying to be a whistleblower, and you ran into this terrible brick wall, and you wrote this book, and the FBI is basically trying to run out the clock on you. So you have published this book without the FBI's permission, and you're basically sitting there waiting for the FBI to come and throw marshmallows at you or something. And can you give us a little more insight into exactly how you were being attacked in terms of a whistleblower, and what parts of the book you think the FBI is most objecting to?
Oh, well, I'm going to try to answer these questions briefly. It's hard to do. But in terms of the content of this book, I was very careful not to include anything that's justifiably classified. And that is maybe a specific method of intelligence gathering, the informant's names, okay, or any investigations that is actually being carried out. It was open. So I limited myself to those investigations that were shut down, and this was per pressure from the State Department and the CIA and the FBI, and without getting into specifics of intelligence gathering methods, such as informants, etc. So I didn't put those in there. And the embarrassing bureaucratic stuff, that was not the reason they invoked the state secrets privilege. I was the first victim of George W. Bush state secrets privilege. If you look at the state secrets privilege, Mike, you will see that they have only invoked it in Pentagon and CIA cases. They have never invoked the state secrets privilege in an FBI whistleblower case. That's number one. Number two, I was only there for 6.5, 7 months. I was a language specialist. I was not an informant or an undercover. So the question that a logical person would ask at this point would be, what were they so scared of? Because they could have done everything they do with other whistleblowers. You know, Jesselyn Raddack, we had, you know, to just say, okay, we're just going to retaliate. But they went into these gag orders and state secrets privilege, and that was not to cover up the bureaucratic bungling and incompetence and waste, fraud, abuse. That was to cover up extremely high-level criminal operations carried out by our government, not by the FBI, by the CIA and the State Department in places such as Central Asia, Turkey, Caucasus. And because this gets into their areas, in fact, the Attorney General at that point, Ashcroft, invoked the state secrets privilege not by his own decision. They had a high-level meetings with Pentagon and State Department officials. And when I say State Department, just read it, a.k.a. the CIA. And it was per their demand that Ashcroft invoked the state secrets privilege. FBI doesn't do that for the state secrets privilege. The state secrets privilege is what they use, Pentagon, but mainly CIA. So you have to look at it and say, why the CIA and the Pentagon, the State Department, why they don't want this book out? Because anybody who is aware of the geopolitical implications of these regions, for example, and I have said this before, I said up until 9/11, and even for a few months after 9/11, I was in the FBI. We never called the, such thing as Al-Qaeda. They were still called our allies, Mujahideen, Bin Laden group, Zawahiri group. We worked with them overseas. You know, people, they think that's true. We worked with Taliban and Bin Laden during 1980s, the Afghan war, and then it ended, and then basically Cold War ended, everything was just ended. That's not true. In mid-1990s, 1995, 1996, all the way till 2002, we, the United States government, specifically Pentagon, State Department, CIA, also there's an arm of NATO that people don't refer to. Either they don't know, the 99% of the people, or those who know, this is considered a highly sensitive, classified arm of NATO that conducts creating terror cells in Central Asia, in Caucasus, and in certain regions in China. So what they do is, and what they were doing, this is NATO and the U.S., they were arming and training Bin Laden and Bin Laden-related groups, including some groups such as Chechens. And they were putting in place these cells in Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. I mean, a lot of people say these are STAN countries. We don't even know where they are. That you're looking at Middle East today, 10 years from now, you're going to be looking at only this region, because that region is that's the region we have been carrying out Cold War over since the fall of the Soviet Union. China wants it. Russia wants this region. We want this. Europe wants it, okay? And so that relationship with Al-Qaeda, with Bin Laden, not only until September 11, even for months after September 11 was taking place in this region. They speak Turkish. I translate Turkish. I was the only Turkish translator for this division for the FBI. And these files, they were dated back to 1996, starting during Clinton administration. And these operations were being carried out also by taxpayer dollars. I don't believe it has ended, that this particular operation, but at that time it was being carried out. Congress would grant $150 million to some NGO that would give it to a Turkish contracting firm to promote democracy in let's say, Kyrgyzstan. That was a fund. And when Congress was allocating that fund for this particular Kyrgyz democratization, they knew very well that this was to facilitate moving south, people from Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia, from Afghanistan, bringing them there and training them there. We built close to 300 madrasas, these religious schools, madrasas, Mike.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And you can find the records of it. We built it through our Turkish NATO allies figure operative called Fethullah Gülen, okay? He's been in the United States since 1999. His net worth is $22 billion. Nobody knows how this money got to the hands of these religious figures. We built over 300 madrasas in Kyrgyzstan, in Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, okay? Russia knows about this. They have known about this. But these are the things that they didn't want through my case to come out. The black ops and these criminal operations we've been conducting in that part of the world using, with NATO and with our NATO allies such as Turkey, using these exact same people we call today Al-Qaeda.
Yes.
So that's what this book is, that's why this book is threatening to them. And this is my book one. Because as I said before, I had to submit this for a pre-pub review. And that's because I'm obligated. Unfortunately, when I started working for the FBI, I was naive. I signed those documents. I gave up on First Amendment rights when it comes to anything related to the FBI that I write. But if this book is successful, my book number 2 is going to be a fiction. The reason it's going to be fiction is because for fiction, I'm not obligated to submit it to any agency.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a fiction that's going to counter government's fiction. And it's going to be
That's a very good way to approach it. Very, very good way to approach it. Okay. All right. Well, listen, I think probably the reason that I, don't see this book as all that threatening to the U.S. government power structure is all of this information is information we've been aware of through other sources. And so it may be that we're dealing with a government that is itself dangerously naive and still thinks they've managed to conceal all of this stuff from the American people. But we know to the contrary, and you in your book know to the contrary. I think the worst thing the government could do right now is come after you. It would have the band in Boston effect, and everybody would all of a sudden want to find out what all the fuss was about. So I'm gonna bet a whole nickel here that you're probably not going to hear from the FBI ever again on this thing, because the last thing they want is to help you build more attention toward this situation. Of course, out here in the alternative media, we're going to keep a lot of attention on you.
And as far as the people goes, I wish you were right. There are a lot of people, but that lot of people still is a minute. I call them the irate minority. Who knows? If you look at 98% of people, no. They are tuning in to MSNBC and CNN. They are reading their New York Times. They don't know. And a lot of them don't want to know, Mike, because...
Well, Sibel, yeah. Pardon the interruption here. I think you may be in for a pleasant surprise. It isn't that bad anymore. I mean,
I hope so. I hope you're right.
The numbers at, NBC is on the verge of bankruptcy. They've lost so much audience. And the news channels are leading the way. The reality is that the viewership and readership of the corporate media has been in decline for almost 20 years now. The readership of our websites and the audience of Republic Broadcasting continue to grow. I would say it's probably a lot closer to 50-50 than you think.
Goodness. I certainly hope you're right, Mike, because where I live, I'm in Sin City, Washington, D.C., and I live in this neighborhood, upper middle class. Most people have master's degrees, and from what I see, absolutely they couldn't care less, and they look the other way. some of these people are afraid even to get. I was going to sign and give a couple of books. They said, well, my husband has a brother who works as a contractor for the government, and it may cause him problem if we are in possession of this book. This is a book I'm selling in Amazon right now. So when I see people, highly educated people, who are that scared, to me, that is really discouraging. And then I see people, millions of these people going through TSA security, every day and get funneled, and they just look numb. That is so troubling. And then people, they're going to go back in November, and they are presented by two pre-selected candidates. They were selected, chosen by the same establishment, by the same shadow government. And they're the ones who come and say, we are giving you two of our choices. You pick one of the two, and we're going to let's call it democracy. So if they think, and when they think in November, they go there and they say, we got to vote, we have to vote either Obama or Romney, to me, that's very troubling, Mike. And
Sibel,
I would like to get encouraged. Please encourage me.
I'm going to encourage you right now because, first of all, you're living right in the belly of the beast, and so you're going to see the world as kind of like your neighborhood, and it isn't. You're this little isolated community of true believers in the American system, and once you get outside of that, you're going to find out it's very different. Look at the photos of Mitt Romney's rallies, and look at the photos of Ron Paul's rallies, and you will understand that Romney's victory in the GOP nominations is a fiction, the result of massive vote fraud. In fact, we're covering more vote fraud stories in hour number 3 of our show today. When you get out into the rest of the real world, you will find out that at least half, if not more, of the people on planet Earth understand the U.S. government has gone hideously wrong. I think you're going to be very pleasantly surprised at how many people are going to buy your book. And that will send you the message that, in point of fact, we all know what's going on. And when I say we, I'm talking about a significant portion of the American public, the people who are thinking, the people who are out there finding out for themselves what's going on. Yes, there's always going to be a bunch of brainwashed people who don't want to know what's going on because they're too cowardly to stand up and try and fix the problems. So they're just going to pretend there's no problem so they can go on thinking they're being really good Americans, just like all those Germans who were good little Nazis and didn't realize that by going along with the government, they were basically hurrying their nation on to utter destruction.
Oh, my, this was so needed because, before publishing this book, I went to the top tier, these mega corporate publishers, and they wouldn't touch it. They said, we know it would sell. It's just that we don't want to be on the wrong side of the FBI, the Justice Department. They can come later redacted. We don't want that kind of headache, so they wouldn't touch it. And some of them, actually, there was one specifically who said, why don't you just limit it to George W. Bush? Because your case took place during George W. Bush, and now you have 100 pages or 80 pages on Obama. Why don't you just leave Obama out of it? Because American readers, they like to read either from this perspective or that perspective. It's either Republican or it's Democrat, and there is no readership for books that are not partisan. I was told this by one of the top 3 publishers.
Well, obviously I disagree with that. And as far as being on the wrong side of the FBI, that's become a permanent lifestyle for me, so I don't care. All right. And I think it's a wonderful book. And like I said, in reading through your descriptions of the incompetence and political backstabbing of the FBI, it just so lines up with my own experiences in dealing with them because many, many years ago, I actually had to go through the process of getting a security clearance as well, relative to something in the space program. So I don't have to worry about publication of or censorship because I'm not writing about any of that stuff that went on. It was actually kind of boring, to be very honest about it. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. When we come back, last segment, I want you to tell everybody how to get your book, where it can be found, all the various places, your URL, and all those other really good things. I want everybody out there, you got to read this book. This is a must-read book. It's going to tell you a lot of the truth about what's been going on inside your, or what we used to call, your government. Classified Woman. We're talking with Sibel Edmonds. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We've spent the last hour with Sibel Edmonds, author of Classified Woman, a memoir of her brief career as a FBI translator and later whistleblower. And it is a memoir of government incompetence, corruption, abuse, and self-serving protection here. Real quick, Sibel, where do people go to get this?
Okay, it's easy. People can visit classifiedwoman.com. It's classifiedwoman.com. And there they will have the links to go if they want a print book. They go to Amazon and they get it there. They can get it directly from the website. Or if they want to have ebooks, they can get it Kindle there, or they can get it through Barnes & Noble's Nook. So it's available in 4 different formats, and they can just pick their choice, the method of the payment or the channel they want to get this book on.
All righty. So any idea when this second book, the novelization of the rest of the story, when is that going to be coming out?
It's a wait-and-see thing. I have to wait and see how it, this book just came out, my book, Memoir, came out 2 weeks ago. And we are giving it a couple of months to see how we do. If it's successful, then I will be able to distribute it and take it to the bookstores. Right now, bookstores, they're not carrying it because they deal with big publishers and major distributors. But then we can get it to bookstores. That's when I can get an editor. I can get the time that I can spend in terms of research and turning a fiction that would challenge the government's fiction. So I really need people's support to go either tell others about this memoir, Classified Woman, or get the book, read it, talk about it. This is not only standing against the government and say, we have our First Amendment, we are standing up on that, but it's also standing against those 1% big mega corporate publishing houses. These guys, they just gave the CIA torturer, the third guy from the top, $2.5 million to publish his memoir. This is a criminal. And then there are people, whistleblowers there, there are activists there. They don't even touch these people, not even for 5,000 or 10,000. So to say you're irrelevant, as you said, with the media, mainstream media, they're becoming smaller and smaller. Now with the self-publishing industry growing, people publishing it via ebooks, we are going to make the corporate publishers irrelevant. And they are screaming about Amazon Creative Space, etc., saying, well, they are taking away our business. Well, they sound like dying cows in the hailstorm. That's what I call them.
Well, actually, what it is they've made a good business with kerosene lanterns, and now they're just complaining about that troublemaker Edison and his light bulb. How dare he come along and spoil things? Basically, the alternative media is creating a revolution in the flow of information in our society as dramatic as that happened when Gutenberg invented movable type, and it is transforming society, and the old guard is going to whine and cry about it. We're out of time this hour. We're going to let you go. Sibel, I'm going to ask you some questions off air by email and about ways to promote your book, because I think it needs to be gotten out there. I think people need to be reading it and sharing it, if for no other reason than to simply poke the FBI in the eye and say, we know you are not the heroes the corporate media try and convince us that you are. Thank you, Sibel. We're going to take a quick station break. We'll be back with hour number 3 in just a minute.